Rex lunged so hard, the leash burned through Caden's glove. 3 explosive barks tore through the station, and every single person froze. An elderly woman in a beige coat gasped, clutching her bag with both hands, tears already rolling down her face. "Please," she begged, "please make him stop. I haven't done anything." Caden yanked the leash with everything he had. Rex wouldn't move, wouldn't quiet, wouldn't stop staring at that bag like something inside it was screaming a name only he could hear. And in less than 2 hours, Caden would understand why. Before we go further, hit that subscribe button and follow this story all the way to the end. Drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning started like every other one Caden Marsh had learned to endure since coming home. Not bad, not good. Just loud in ways nobody else could hear. He walked the main floor of Asheville Regional Transit Hub at 8:47 in the morning, Rex moving at his left heel, both of them doing what they always did, reading the room before the room knew it was being read. Caden was 30 years old, but the lines around his eyes belonged to someone older. His NWU Type 3 uniform, the green and brown digital camouflage of a man still attached to the Navy, even when the Navy said he was temporarily reassigned, fit him the way a second skin fits a person who stopped knowing where the uniform ended and they began. Rex was 5, tan and black, thick-coated, with amber eyes that caught light the way still water does. People looked at him the way people always looked at a beautiful working dog, with admiration and just enough distance. They didn't know what Caden knew. They didn't know that 3 years ago, in the rubble outside Djibouti, Rex had dragged Caden by the collar 40 feet from a burning vehicle before the fuel tank detonated. They didn't know about the shrapnel lodged near Rex's left haunch that the vet said was safer to leave than remove. They didn't know that the scar under Caden's collarbone matched the one on his dog in a way that felt less like coincidence and more like a shared language. They were the kind of partners that only exist after surviving the same fire. Caden checked the east platform. Clear. He swept through the waiting area near the ticket counter. Clear. A college kid was filming himself in front of the holiday display in the main atrium. A woman in her 50s was arguing quietly into her phone about a delayed connection. Somewhere near the coffee kiosk, a man in a gray coat dropped his keys and swore under his breath. Ordinary. All of it ordinary. "Routine's clean," Caden murmured, more to Rex than to anyone else. 10 more minutes and we circle back. Rex's ears moved forward. Not a lot, just enough. Caden felt it before he understood it. That slight shift in the leash tension, the way Rex's pace changed from controlled to alert in the space of a single step. He had learned years ago not to ignore that shift. Every time he had, something went wrong. "What is it?" he said quietly. Rex stopped walking entirely. His head turned toward the east bench, the long wooden one near the platform gate for the 9:15 to Charlotte. And there, sitting alone with a worn brown traveling bag across her lap, was a woman who looked like she belonged in a church pew or a grandchild's kitchen, not a transit hub at rush hour. She was small, maybe 74, 75, beige coat, silver hair pinned back with a single clip. Her hands, spotted and knotted with age, held the bag the way a person holds something they've been told is fragile. Her lips moved faintly, like she was praying or counting or doing the math on whether her train was going to be late. She did not look like a threat. She looked like someone's grandmother who deserved a cup of tea and a warm seat, and nobody bothering her. Rex's body went rigid from the base of his neck to the tip of his tail. "Easy," Caden said. "Easy, Rex." The command meant nothing. Rex erupted. 3 barks, deep and thunderous, The kind that don't come from the chest so much as from somewhere below it, somewhere instinctual and old, and not connected to training at all. The entire terminal flinched. People spun around. A child near the vending machine started crying. The woman on the bench, Margaret Doane, pressed herself backward and pulled the bag against her chest, and her face collapsed into something raw and terrified. "Please," she said, loud enough that Caden heard her clearly over Rex's barking. "Please, make him stop. I'm just waiting for my train." Caden pulled the leash hard. "Rex, heel." Rex took one step back and kept barking. That had never happened, not once in 4 years. Rex had been through firefights, through detonations, through the kind of chaos that breaks most animals and a fair number of people. He had never, not one single time, ignored a direct command. A young transit security officer jogged over. His name tag said Briley. He was maybe 25, still carrying the energy of someone who hadn't yet seen enough to know what scared him. "Sir, what is your dog doing? That lady looks about ready to have a heart attack." "I know," Caden said, not looking at him. "She's elderly. She's not a threat. Can you control your animal?" "He doesn't bark without a reason." Caden moved closer to Margaret, keeping his voice deliberate and low, the tone he used when he needed someone to hear him instead of his rank. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Marsh. I apologize for frightening you. I need you to stay calm. My dog is trained to detect things that aren't always visible. He's not reacting to you. He's reacting to something near you." Margaret stared at him with wet eyes. "There's nothing in that bag. It's just some things for the trip. My medicine, a photograph, some clothes." Rex went quiet. Not relaxed. Quiet. Head lowered, eyes fixed, nostrils working in short, deliberate pulls. That was worse than the barking. Caden had learned the difference between those two modes the hard way. When Rex barked, he was alerting. When Rex went silent and still like that, staring, breathing, reading, he was confirming. "I'm going to need to ask you to come with me to the security area," Caden said. "It's a private room. Just a scan of your bag. 5 minutes, and you'll still make your train." "I haven't done anything wrong." Her voice broke on the last word. "I know that, and I'm not treating you like you have. But my dog doesn't react this way without a reason, and I need to understand the reason before I can let you go." Briley leaned in close to Caden's shoulder. "Man, she's ancient. She could barely lift that bag when she sat down." "You really think she's carrying something?" Caden didn't answer him. He offered his hand to Margaret. She looked at it for a moment, like she wasn't sure it was real. And then she took it, and he guided her slowly toward the corridor that led to the private screening room. Rex walking at his side, the barking gone, the silence somehow heavier. The scanner took 40 seconds. Joey Rell, the technician on shift, ran it twice because the first reading came back clean, and Caden asked him to run it again. Joey was 28, with the specific kind of nervous energy that came from wanting to do the job right, without yet knowing what the job actually cost. "Clean," Joey said. "No metal, no explosive compound, no electronic signal. Whatever your dog smelled, sir, I'm not seeing it." "Change the frequency range," Caden said. "I already ran the full standard protocol." "I didn't ask about standard protocol. I asked you to change the frequency range." Joey looked at him, then looked at Rex, who was still stationed 6 inches from the bag, with his head low and his eyes unblinking. And Joey changed the frequency range. The scanner beeped, not the clean double tone of a clear reading, a single erratic pulse. Yellow light, faint and inconsistent, but there. "That's a transmission signal," Joey said slowly. "Low grade. Could be a phone battery, could be a keyless entry fob, could be—" "It's not a fob," Caden said. "Cut the lining." Margaret made a soft sound of protest. That bag belonged to my husband." "I know. I'm sorry." Caden kept his voice steady. "I'll have it repaired." Joey cut a 4-inch seam along the base of the inner lining and stopped. He reached in with tweezers and lifted out something so small it nearly disappeared between the metal tips. Matte black, oblong, no larger than a grain of rice. He placed it on the glass tray under the magnifier. Caden leaned forward and saw the etching on the casing, and the air left his lungs so fast it felt like a punch. A coiled serpent wrapped around a surgical knife. He had seen that symbol before. He had worn it, stitched onto a uniform in a tent in the Djibouti interior 7 years ago, before a classified medical research program called Meridian was shut down without explanation, and its chief surgeon, Dr. Harlan Voss, disappeared without a trial. Before a 22-year-old corporal named James Sato died from a compound that was labeled on the paperwork as a standard pain management protocol. Before Caden signed a non-disclosure and told himself it was the mission and not a murder. "Sir?" Joey's voice came from somewhere far away. "You recognize the insignia?" Caden straightened. His hand was steady. His voice was steady. Everything about him on the outside was steady, because that was what 12 years of training did to a person. But Rex looked up at him then, amber eyes direct and patient, the way the dog always looked when he understood before Caden was ready to. "Yeah," Caden said. "I recognize it." Margaret clutched the armrests of her chair. "What is it? What does it mean?" Caden turned to face her and looked at her the way he had learned to look at people who were about to receive information that would rearrange their understanding of something they thought was safe. "It means," he said carefully, "that someone put that chip in your bag on purpose. And whoever they are, they've been watching where that bag has been going." The room went very quiet. Margaret's face moved through confusion, then fear, then something older and worse than fear. "Watching me?" she whispered. Rex sat down beside her chair and pressed his shoulder gently against her knee. Outside the screening room, the morning commute continued without interruption. Trains arrived, people departed. The holiday display blinked cheerfully in the atrium. The world kept moving. And inside that small room, with its flickering light and its steel table and its grain of rice-sized secret, Caden Marsh looked at the serpent coiled around the surgical knife and understood that whatever he thought he had left behind in that desert tent 7 years ago had just found him again. Joey stood there, holding the evidence pouch with both hands, like it might bite him. "What do we do with it?" he asked. "You seal it, you log it, and you don't mention it to anyone until I tell you to." Caden pulled out his phone. "And I mean anyone, Joey. Not your supervisor, not the platform manager, nobody." Joey swallowed. "That's not exactly protocol." "No, it's not." Caden looked at him. "Do it anyway." Joey sealed the pouch. Margaret hadn't moved. She was sitting with both hands pressed flat on her thighs, staring at the glass tray where the chip had been. And Caden could see the exact moment her mind caught up with what was happening, because her breathing changed. It went from shallow and frightened to something slower and more dangerous. The breathing of a person trying to hold themselves together from the inside. "Someone put that in my bag," she said, not a question. "Yes." "Without me knowing?" "Yes." She closed her eyes. "The man at the care home told me not to let anyone search it. He said it was sensitive material. Documents. He said if anyone at the station asked questions, I should say it was my husband's personal effects, and they would leave me alone." She opened her eyes and looked directly at Caden. "I thought he meant customs paperwork. I thought he meant something legal." "What man?" Caden kept his voice flat and even. Tell me exactly what he looked like. Tall, maybe 60. He had a limp, his left leg, and a burn scar on his left hand. The kind that goes up the wrist. She touched her own wrist to show him. He came to Ridgewood. That's the Veterans Care Facility where I've been staying since my hip surgery. He said he was with a program called Meridian Medical Outreach. He had a folder with an official seal on it. He knew my son's name. He knew Daniel's unit designation. He knew things that aren't public. Rex lifted his head at the sound of the distress in her voice. He told you Daniel was alive, Caden said. Margaret's chin dropped slightly. He showed me a photograph. A man in a hospital bed with medical equipment around him. The face was partially obscured, but the build, the hairline, something about the jaw. Her voice fractured. A mother knows her child, Officer Marsh. Even after 4 years. Even when everyone else tells you to move on. She pressed her fingers to her mouth for a moment. He said Daniel had been recovered from a private detainment situation and needed medical transport documentation moved through a federal checkpoint without triggering a customs flag. He said the bag would complete the circuit and my son would be home within 30 days. The room was quiet, except for the ventilation hum overhead. Caden breathed once, carefully. Mrs. Doan, I need you to listen to me very closely. Your son did not send that man. That seal on the folder was not a government seal. And whoever showed you that photograph was not trying to bring Daniel home. She stared at him. They were using you, he said. Because you're a veteran's mother. Because you've been patient for 4 years. Because you love your son, and they knew exactly how to aim that love at a target. The silence that followed was the worst kind. The kind where someone understands something and cannot un-understand it. Am I going to be arrested? She asked quietly. No. He said it without hesitation. You're a victim. You're going to be treated like one. Joey had been trying very hard to look busy at the scanner. He cleared his throat. I'm running the chip's transmission history now. It's going to take a few minutes to decrypt the routing data. Run it, Caden said. He pulled a chair close to Margaret and sat down so they were at eye level, a habit from years of delivering information to people who needed to receive it as equals, not as subordinates. The symbol on that chip, he said, the serpent around the knife. I know what it is. It was the insignia of a classified Navy medical research program. It was shut down 8 years ago. The man who ran it was a surgeon named Harlan Voss. Margaret frowned. Voss. I've heard that name. From where? The man at the care home. He mentioned it once. He said Dr. Voss was the one coordinating Daniel's medical recovery. He said doctor. Voss was the only person with the clearance to authorize the transfer. She shook her head slowly. I thought it was a real name. A real doctor. I looked it up online and found nothing, which he said was because the program was classified. Caden sat back. Voss hadn't just disappeared. He'd rebuilt. Sir, Joey's voice was tight. I've got something. Caden stood and moved to the monitor. The decrypted routing data showed a transmission log. The chip had been pinging a receiver at irregular intervals for the past 6 weeks. The last confirmed ping had bounced off a repeater node registered to a defunct nonprofit at a warehouse address on Asheville's waterfront. Meridian Medical Continuity Foundation. Registered, dissolved. Apparently not gone. That address, Caden said. Pull everything attached to it. Already pulling. Joey's fingers moved fast. Power account reactivated 11 weeks ago. Utility billing goes to a Shell LLC in Delaware. Delivery logs show 2 shipments per month from a freight company out of Boston. The manifest labels say nutritional aid, humanitarian medical supplies. But the freight IDs don't match any registered carrier in the federal database. He's running it through a charity front, Caden said. Humanitarian labels get flagged less aggressively at checkpoints. He's been moving product under the cover of medical outreach and using couriers who have zero criminal profile. Couriers like her, Joey said quietly, then looked immediately guilty for saying it. Margaret heard him. She didn't react with anger. She reacted with something worse. Recognition. There were others at Ridgewood who had visitors, she said slowly. A woman named Dolores. She mentioned a man who came to see her about her brother, a veteran who went missing in Iraq. And there was Harold on the second floor. He told me a man had come about his son's remains, said they'd found something new. She pressed her hand against her sternum. We all thought we were the only one. Caden's jaw tightened. Not one courier, a network. Elderly, isolated, invisible. Each one carrying grief specific enough to be surgical. Each one chosen because their love had nowhere left to go, and someone had handed it a direction. How many people have come through Ridgewood in the last 6 months? He asked. I don't know. 40 residents? Maybe more? Joey, cross-reference the care home's visitor log with the freight delivery schedule from that warehouse. I'd need authorization from the facility director to access. Call the facility director. Joey called. Rex had been sitting beside Margaret the entire time, and she had been resting her hand on his back without seeming to realize it. The way people reach for something solid when everything else has started moving. Rex hadn't shifted once. The facility director, a woman named Karen Pruitt, confirmed that a representative from Meridian Medical Outreach had visited Ridgewood 11 times over the past 5 months. Different name each visit. Same physical description. Tall, older, limping, burn scar on the left hand. 11 visits. Caden looked at the delivery log and counted the matching dates. He visited before every shipment, he said. He seated the couriers, then ran the product through them on the same freight cycle. Margaret, your train today. What time does it arrive in Charlotte? 1:45 in the afternoon. And the freight log shows a delivery scheduled to a distribution address in Charlotte at 3 p.m. today. He looked at Joey. He times the couriers to arrive ahead of the product. Separate entry points, same destination window. Even if one courier is flagged, the primary shipment moves clean. Margaret's hand had gone still on Rex's back. What was in my bag? She asked. The real thing, not the chip. What was I actually carrying? Caden paused. We don't know yet, he said, but we're going to find out. That was the moment Rex stood up, not slowly. He came to his feet in a single fluid motion, turned toward Margaret, and pressed his nose to her coat, her scarf, the side of the traveling bag still sitting on the table. Then he sat back down directly in front of her and stared at Caden with an intensity that stopped everything in the room. Joey froze. What is he doing? Caden didn't answer because Rex had never done that before. Not exactly like that. He had done the alert posture. He had done the confirmation sit. But this was different. This was Rex looking at him with something close to urgency. Not about the bag anymore. About Margaret. Mrs. Doan, Caden said, his voice shifting into a register that was careful and deliberate. Are you feeling all right? She blinked. I'm a little short of breath. I thought it was just the nerves. How long have you been short of breath? Since I sat down on the bench this morning. I thought it was the cold. Caden was already reaching for the door. Joey, call medical, now. What? Why, what's call medical right now? Rex stood beside Margaret and did not move, and his amber eyes tracked every breath she took. And Caden understood then, with a cold and absolute certainty, that whatever Harlan Voss had put in that bag or on that woman, the chip was not the only thing Rex had been trying to tell him about. The bag had been the signal. Margaret Doane was the message. The paramedic who responded was a woman named Daria Cole, mid-30s, with a kind of calm that only comes from having seen people at their worst and choosing to show up anyway. She took one look at Margaret, checked her pulse with 2 fingers, and her expression did the thing that trained faces do when they are working very hard not to show what they already know.
"How long has she been like this?"
Daria asked.
"She said since this morning,"
Caden answered.
"She thought it was nerves."
"It's not nerves." Daria reached for her radio. Margaret grabbed her wrist, not hard, but with the grip of someone who needed to say something before the moment was taken from her.
"I'm not going to a hospital," she said. "My train leaves in 40 minutes. Mrs. Doane,"
Daria's voice was gentle and immovable at the same time.
"Your pulse is irregular, and your blood pressure is low enough that I'm genuinely concerned. I need you to let me help you. I've been irregular for 20 years. My cardiologist says—" "Ma'am,"
Daria leaned forward slightly.
"this isn't a conversation I can let you win."
Margaret looked at Caden. He held her gaze.
"Go with her," he said. "I'll be right behind you."
Something in the way he said it, not as a suggestion, but as a promise, made her release Daria's wrist and press both hands back onto her lap. Rex walked beside the wheelchair the entire length of the corridor without being told to. Nobody gave him the command. He simply stayed, shoulder level with Margaret's armrest, close enough that she could feel his warmth without reaching for it. Joey caught up to Caden in the hallway, slightly out of breath.
"I've got more on the warehouse. Do you want it now, or—"
"Talk while we move," Caden said. They walked fast. Joey pulled up his tablet.
"I cross-referenced the delivery manifest with the care home visitor log like you asked. 11 visits, 11 corresponding shipments. But here's what I didn't expect. 3 of the courier names in the freight intake logs are listed as deceased in the Social Security database."
Caden stopped walking. "Say that again."
3 names listed as package recipients at the Charlotte distribution address are dead. 2 of them died within 60 days of the shipping date. 1 died on the same day the package was marked as delivered.
Joey's voice had gone quieter. "I don't think it's a coincidence. I think whoever these people were, they were couriers, and I think something went wrong with them." Caden started walking again, faster. "Pull their medical records, cause of death." "I already tried. 2 of them are sealed under federal privacy protection. The 3rd one, a man named Gerald Houck, 71, former Army, died of acute organ failure at a hospital in Raleigh. The attending physician noted an unidentified compound in his blood work that didn't match any standard pharmaceutical." "They died carrying it," Caden said. "Or from it," Joey said. The ambulance bay doors opened ahead of them. Daria and her partner were loading Margaret's stretcher. Rex had stopped at the threshold and stood watching, ears forward, waiting for Caden to tell him what happened next. Caden put a hand on Rex's head. "You're coming with me," he said. "Let's go." Asheville General was 12 minutes from the transit hub. Caden spent 11 of those minutes on the phone with Captain Bree Halston of the Asheville Federal Crimes Division, laying out everything. The chip, the insignia, Voss, the warehouse, the courier network, the dead names in the freight log. Halston listened without interrupting, which was how he knew she understood the weight of it. "I need a warrant for that warehouse," he said. "I need more than a chip and a freight log to get a judge out of bed on a Tuesday morning," she said. "Then I need you to start the paperwork while I get you more." A pause. "What are you expecting to find at the hospital, Marsh?" "I don't know yet," he said. "But Rex knew something was wrong with her before the scanner did, and Rex has never been wrong." Another pause. Shorter. "Keep me on the line with whatever comes out of that ER." The trauma bay at Asheville General smelled like antiseptic and urgency. "Doctor," Lara Finch was already there when they brought Margaret in, a woman in her mid-40s with short, dark hair and the specific quality of attention that made patients feel seen and residents feel inadequate. She ran her assessment with the economy of someone who had done it 10,000 times and still treated each one like the only one. Caden stood near the wall, with Rex at his side. Daria gave the handoff report. Irregular pulse, low pressure, mild confusion, no known acute cardiac event. Finch checked Margaret's eyes, her abdomen, her breathing pattern. Then she paused. She pressed 2 fingers lightly below Margaret's ribs on the right side and watched Margaret's face. Margaret winced. "How long have you had tenderness here?" Finch asked. "A few days. I thought it was my back." Finch ordered an ultrasound without explaining why. The technician ran the probe across Margaret's abdomen, and the monitor filled with the gray and black shapes of interior anatomy. Finch watched the screen with the focused stillness of someone reading a language most people couldn't see. Then she said, very quietly, "Stop, right there." The technician stopped. Finch leaned in. On the screen, among the familiar shadows of organs and tissue, there was something that didn't belong. A shape. Smooth-edged, oblong, dense in a way that organic tissue was not. "Is that a growth?" the technician asked. "No," Finch said. "That's a foreign object." The room changed the way rooms change when something shifts from medical to something else entirely. Finch turned to Caden. Her voice was even and precise. "I need a CT scan before I can confirm. But based on what I'm seeing, there is a sealed object in the peritoneal cavity. It appears to have been placed there surgically, recently, within the last 8 weeks, based on the tissue response around it." Margaret turned her head toward Caden. Her eyes were wide and very still, the way eyes get when the mind is moving too fast for the face to keep up. "Placed there," she repeated. "You're saying someone put something inside me?" Finch looked at her with the directness of someone who understood that softening the truth at this point would only cause more damage. "That's what I'm saying, yes. We need the CT to confirm size and composition, but I want you to understand that if this object is compromised in any way, there is a risk of rupture, and we need to act quickly." Margaret said nothing. She turned her face toward the ceiling and breathed. Rex made a sound. Not a bark, not a growl. A low, soft vocalization that Caden had only heard him make once before, outside a burn ward in a military hospital in Germany, when a soldier who had lost both legs was lying in the dark, not making any sound at all. It was the sound Rex made when he understood that a person was enduring something alone, and he wanted them to know they weren't. Margaret heard it. She reached one hand down from the bed, and Rex stepped forward and pressed his muzzle against her palm. The CT came back in 22 minutes. Finch pulled Caden into the corridor and showed him the image on the tablet screen. The object was clearly visible now. A polymer pouch, roughly the size of a flattened walnut, sealed with medical-grade adhesive. Inside it, visible under the contrast imaging, a compressed powder substance. "Whatever is in that pouch," Finch said, "it is not pharmaceutical. The density pattern is inconsistent with any medication I've seen, and the pouch itself is showing microfractures along the lower seam. It's degrading." "If it ruptures," Caden said, "the absorption rate into the surrounding tissue would be rapid. Depending on the compound, we could be looking at systemic toxicity within minutes." She paused. If she had made it to Charlotte and spent another day on her feet, the physical stress alone could have— "She wouldn't have made it home," Caden said. Finch held his gaze. "No, she would not have." Caden stepped back into the trauma bay. Margaret was watching him. She had the look of a woman who had already assembled the pieces
and was waiting for someone to confirm the picture. "Tell me," she said. "There's a sealed pouch inside you," he said. "It was put there, surgically. We don't know exactly what's in it yet, but it's degrading, and Dr. Finch needs to remove it, now." Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "He used me to carry drugs." "Yes. And I was supposed to die carrying them." Caden didn't answer. He didn't need to. "My son," she said. Her voice was flat and precise now, stripped of the trembling, like something had burned through the grief and left something harder underneath. "Daniel was never found, was he?" "I don't know," Caden said, "but I am going to find out. That's a promise, not a courtesy." She looked at Rex. Rex looked back at her. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a cry. "He knew," she said. "That dog knew before any of you." "He always does," Caden said. Finch appeared in the doorway. "We need to move her, now. The fracture pattern is accelerating." Margaret reached out and gripped Caden's forearm with both hands. Her grip was stronger than he expected. "You find him," she said. "Not just Voss. Whoever told Voss that I was a good target. Whoever looked at a grieving old woman and saw a container." Her voice didn't break. "You find them." "I will," Caden said. They wheeled her out. Rex stepped aside and watched her go, and then he turned to Caden, and the amber eyes asked the only question that mattered. Caden pulled out his phone and called Halston. "I have enough for your warrant," he said. She had a surgically implanted drug pouch. She was never meant to survive the delivery. Voss didn't just use her as a courier. He used her as a disposable container, and the moment that pouch ruptured, there was no evidence, no trail, and no witness. Halston's voice was ice. "I'll have the warrant in 2 hours." "Make it 1, Caden said. "He's going to know the chip went dark. When he figures out we found it, he'll burn the warehouse." The line was quiet for 3 seconds. 1 hour, Halston said. Caden ended the call and looked at Rex. The dog was already facing the exit, weight forward, ready. Down the hall, Margaret was being prepped for surgery. 3 other names from Joey's list were still out there somewhere, carrying something they didn't know they were carrying, moving through train stations and bus depots and airport terminals, every hour, bringing them closer to the same cliff Margaret had just been pulled back from. Caden tightened his glove and walked toward the door. Rex matched him step for step, and neither of them looked back. The warrant came through in 53 minutes. Halston called, while Caden was still in the hospital parking lot, Rex sitting in the back of the tactical vehicle with his ears up and his breath fogging the rear window. "Judge signed it," Halston said. "Warehouse, all associated structures, full search and seizure authority. I've got a 4-person team staging at the waterfront in 20 minutes. Your lead entry." "I'll be there in 15, Caden said. "Marsh," her voice shifted slightly. "Intel from the freight database came back while you were at the hospital. The Boston carrier tied to those shipments? It's a front company registered 18 months ago. But the founding signature on the LLC paperwork matches a name that ran through a Department of Defense contractor clearance in 2016. The name is Harlan Voss." "He never stopped," Caden said. "No, he just got quieter." A pause. "There's something else. The DoD file on Meridian, the one that was sealed after the program shut down. Someone accessed it remotely 6 weeks ago from an IP address that bounced through 3 proxy servers before landing on a node registered to that same warehouse." Caden was quiet for a moment. He was checking to see if the file was still sealed. Or he was checking to see who else had accessed it recently. Meaning he may already know someone's been looking. "That's what I'm concerned about," Halston said. "Move fast." Caden ended the call and looked at Rex in the rearview mirror.
You ready? Rex's ears pushed forward. Yeah, Caden said. Me too. The waterfront was cold and gray and smelled of salt and machine oil. Halston's team was already staged when Caden arrived. 4 officers in tactical gear, with a battering ram and a portable thermal unit. Halston herself stood at the back of the command vehicle, auburn hair tucked under her cap, reviewing the building schematic on a tablet with the focused expression of someone who had stopped being nervous about operations like this a long time ago. She handed Caden an earpiece without looking up. Thermal shows 2 heat signatures inside, one stationary near the north wall, one moving near the center of the floor. The stationary one hasn't moved in 40 minutes. Could be a guard sleeping, said Officer Trent Barrow, the team's entry specialist, a broad-shouldered man in his late 30s who had the habit of cracking his knuckles before every operation and seemed unaware that he did it. Could be someone who can't move, Caden said. Halston looked up. Meaning? Meaning, if Voss knew the chip went dark, he may have already started eliminating loose ends. He looked at the building. The stationary signature. What's the body temperature reading? The thermal operator checked. 94.2. Low, but not critical. Someone restrained, Caden said. Not dead. Not yet. Halston made the decision in under 2 seconds. We go now. Barrow, front entry. Reyes and Kim, east window. Marsh, you're with me on secondary entry through the loading dock. Dog leads once we're inside. Rex was already at Caden's heel, head low, every line of his body tuned to what was coming. They moved. The loading dock door gave way on the second hit. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of chemicals and something underneath it. Something medicinal and stale. The smell of a place where clinical work had been done without clinical oversight. Caden registered it immediately. He had smelled it before, in that tent in Djibouti, when Meridian was still operating under the cover of official sanction, and nobody asked enough questions. Rex moved ahead, nose working, body low. Caden followed with his sidearm up. The crates were stacked along the west wall, labeled in clean black stencil. Nutritional aid, humanitarian medical supplies, Appalachian Outreach Program. Each one a careful lie. Each one a structure built to pass through checkpoints on the trust of institutions that couldn't afford to question everything. The moving heat signature was near the center of the floor. Rex stopped. Caden came around the corner of a crate stack and found him. Harlan Voss was standing at a metal workbench with his back to the entry point, his attention fixed on a laptop screen. His left hand, the burn-scarred one Margaret had described, resting flat on the bench surface as though steadying himself. He was older than Caden remembered, thinner. The white lab coat he wore over a dark wool sweater was clean in a way that felt deliberate, like a man who needed to believe he was still a physician, even when everything else had collapsed. He didn't turn around immediately. When he spoke, his voice was calm and slightly hoarse, the voice of someone who had been alone for a long time. I figured it would be you, Voss said. When the chip went dark, I ran the duty roster for the transit hub. Saw your name on the Federal Task Force assignment. He turned then, slowly, and looked at Caden with eyes that were exhausted, in a way that went deeper than sleep. You always had the instinct for finding things that weren't supposed to be found. Step away from the bench, Caden said. Voss didn't move. Is she alive? The woman. She's in surgery. Something crossed Voss's face. Not guilt exactly. Something more complicated, and in some ways worse. The pouch was supposed to be stable for 72 hours. The microfracture shouldn't have developed that quickly. The polymer formula was modified, and I hadn't completed the stress testing and... He stopped. He heard himself. He closed his eyes for 1 second. She wasn't supposed to be hurt. She was supposed to die in Charlotte, Caden said. Cause of death listed as natural. Unidentified compound in the bloodstream, written off as a medication interaction. No trail, no investigation, no evidence. That's not what I designed, Voss said sharply. Then who did? The question landed in the room and stayed there. Voss looked at him for a long moment. Then he pulled a folding chair from under the bench, sat down on it, and pressed both hands between his knees, like a man preparing to confess something he had been carrying alone for years. After Meridian was shut down, he said, I was approached by a private contractor, former DOD. He said the compound work I'd done on pain suppression and neurotrauma response was worth continuing outside federal oversight. He said there were veterans suffering who weren't getting adequate treatment, and the only reason the compound hadn't been approved was pharmaceutical lobbying. I believed him. You believed him, Caden said flatly. I wanted to believe him. Voss looked up. There's a difference. I know that now. He exhaled slowly. The courier system wasn't my design. I designed the compound, the delivery methodology, the surgical implantation, the use of elderly veterans' family members. That came from him. By the time I understood what the distribution chain actually looked like, I was already inside it. I had no license, no standing, no protection. If I went to the authorities, everything pointed at me. It still does, Caden said. I know. Voss said it without argument. Sato, he added quietly. James Sato. I think about him every day. That was my fault. The interaction between the compounds was my error, and I knew it within 12 hours, and I reported it, and they sealed the report, and I let them. That's what I let them do. His voice dropped. I told myself it was the mission, that the larger work justified it. I had been telling myself that for 8 years, and I stopped believing it about 6 months ago. Barrow's voice came through the earpiece. We've got the second signature, north wall. It's a male, 40s, zip-tied to a support beam. Alive, minor injuries. He's got a Transit Hub employee badge. Caden kept his eyes on Voss. Who is he? Voss looked away. A freight coordinator who figured out the manifest irregularities. He came here 2 days ago with questions. I didn't hurt him. I just couldn't let him leave. You held a man captive for 2 days, Halston said from behind Caden, her voice sharp and controlled. Voss didn't argue. Rex moved to Caden's left, positioning himself between Voss and the bench, not threatening, but present, the way he always positioned when he needed a person to understand that the space around them had changed. Voss looked at the dog. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition. I remember reading about a canine unit deployed out of Djibouti that pulled a SEAL operator out of a vehicle ambush. He looked at Caden. That was you. That was us, Caden said. Voss nodded slowly. He looked at Rex with an expression that had nothing clinical in it anymore. Remarkable animal, he said softly. The loyalty is unconditional. It doesn't calculate. It doesn't justify. It just acts. He pressed his hands together. I used to be like that, when I was a young surgeon, before I started deciding which lives were worth the cost of saving them. Get up, Caden said. Hands where I can see them. Voss stood. He reached slowly into the pocket of his lab coat, and Caden's weapon came up instantly, and Barrow was through the door in 2 seconds with his own weapon raised. Voss froze. It's a drive, he said. A flash drive. It has everything. Every transaction record, every contractor communication, every name in the distribution chain above me. The man who designed the courier system, who ordered the implantation procedure, who handled the financial routing. He held it out between 2 fingers. I've had it ready for 6 months. I just needed someone worth handing it to. Nobody moved. Rex looked at Caden. Caden looked at the drive. Why now? He said. Voss's voice was very quiet. Because when the chip went dark, and I saw your name on the duty roster, I remembered who you were. I remembered what you were. He held the drive out further. You're the kind of man who goes back into the fire, even when it's not your fire anymore. His eyes moved briefly to Rex. Apparently, so is he. Barrow moved forward and took the drive with a gloved hand, sealed it in an evidence bag without a word. Halston stepped forward with the restraints. Voss put his wrists together without being asked. As Halston secured him and began reading his rights, Voss looked over her shoulder at Caden one last time.
"The contractor who built the courier system," he said. "His name is on that drive. He has 3 other networks running, other care homes, other cities, other Margaret Doanes." He held Caden's gaze. "Don't let the arrest stop at me." Caden said nothing. Halston walked Voss toward the loading dock. Barrow followed with the evidence. The freed freight coordinator was being helped out the east side by Reyes, shaky-legged and pale, but moving under his own power. The room went quiet. Rex pressed against Caden's leg and looked up at him, amber eyes steady and patient, and asking nothing. Caden reached down and put his hand on the back of his dog's neck. And for a moment, he just stood there in the silence of a room full of careful lies coming apart. And he thought about Sato, 22 years old, in a tent in the desert. And he thought about Margaret Doane's grip on his arm when she said, "Find them." And he thought about how Rex had known all of it, before any human in that station had seen a single thing wrong. "Good boy," he said quietly. Rex's tail moved once. Outside, Halston's voice carried over the radio. Units were already being dispatched to 3 other cities based on the preliminary data from the drive. Other warehouses, other fake charities, other elderly veterans' family members who had been handed false hope and a bag and a train ticket. The work wasn't finished. It was just beginning. But the fire had a name now, and Caden Marsh had never walked away from a fire in his life. The drive contained 47 names. Halston called Caden at 6:14 in the morning while he was still sitting in the hospital waiting room with Rex's head across his knee. She didn't say hello. She just started reading. Contractor name at the top is Elliot Crane, former DoD logistics coordinator, discharged 2015. 3 civilian contracts after that, all defense adjacent. He built the courier architecture, sourced the care homes, ran the financial routing through 6 shell companies across 4 states. Voss designed the product. Crane designed the system. Her voice was measured and hard. "We have enough to arrest him right now." "Where is he?" Caden asked. "That's the problem." A pause. "He was booked on a flight out of Charlotte Douglas this morning at 7:45, connecting to Zurich." Caden looked at the clock on the wall. 6:17. "Halston, I've already called Charlotte PD. Federal hold is being processed right now, but the paperwork has to clear 2 desks before they can pull him from the gate. And both those desks open at 7. Another pause, shorter and harder. "It's going to be close." Caden stood up. Rex lifted his head immediately, ears forward. "If he gets on that plane," Caden said. "He doesn't get on that plane," Halston said, with the kind of certainty that wasn't confidence so much as refusal. "I will personally call every number I have until someone physically stands in that jetway. You focus on Margaret. I'll focus on Crane." Caden sat back down. Rex watched him for a moment, reading the tension the way he always did, then rested his head back across Caden's knee and exhaled slowly. The weight of him was steady and warm and more grounding than anything Caden could have said to himself. A nurse named Patricia, older, with reading glasses pushed up into her gray hair, came through the waiting room door. "Mr. Marsh? Dr. Finch asked me to let you know Mrs. Doane is out of surgery. She's in recovery.
The procedure went well. Caden released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Can I see her?" "Give her 20 minutes, Patricia said. Then she looked at Rex. "He's going to have to stay out here." Rex looked at her. Patricia looked at Rex. 10 minutes, she said. "And he stays on the floor." Caden almost smiled. "Yes, ma'am." He used the 20 minutes to call Joey, who had been awake since the transit hub and sounded like it, but was still pulling data with the specific persistence of someone who had decided this mattered. "I found something in the Meridian personnel files," Joey said. "The ones that were unsealed when the federal warrant went through this morning. There's a record of a corporal listed as a research subject in the final phase of Meridian's trial program in 2019. The subject number is M47. The attached personnel record is Daniel Doan." The waiting room was quiet, except for the ventilation hum.
"What does the record say?" Caden asked.
"That's the thing." Joey's voice went careful. "The record is incomplete. It lists him as enrolled in the program, but the outcome field is blank. Not deceased, not discharged. Blank. Like someone removed the entry and didn't finish the job." A keyboard sound. "Caden, a blank outcome in a classified medical trial file doesn't mean he died. It means someone didn't want a paper trail of what happened to him." Caden pressed his hand flat against his thigh. "Are you saying Daniel Doan might be alive?" "I'm saying I can't confirm he's dead. And in a classified file, those are two very different things." Joey paused. "I'm sending this to Halston, but I thought you should know before you go in there." Caden looked at the door to the recovery wing. He thought about what Margaret had said. A mother knows her child, even after 4 years, even when everyone else tells her to move on. He thought about Crane using that knowledge as a weapon, taking something sacred and turning it into a mechanism. Reaching into the specific architecture of a mother's grief and pulling the exact lever that would make her carry anything, anywhere, without a single question. He thought about the 47 names on the drive. How many of them had been told the same thing? How many had packed a bag and kissed someone goodbye and walked into a train station carrying hope that had been manufactured specifically to destroy them? He stood up and walked to the recovery wing door. Rex followed. Patricia was at the nurse's station, and she saw them coming. And she looked at Rex, and she looked at Caden, and she said, 10 minutes, and moved aside. Margaret was awake. She was pale, and there were tubes and monitors, and the particular quiet of a body that had been through something significant. But her eyes were clear and sharp, and when Caden came through the door, she tracked him immediately. The way people do when they have been waiting for specific information, and they can tell from the way a person walks whether it's good or bad. "She's awake," Caden said to Rex, unnecessarily. Rex was already moving to the side of the bed, slow and careful, aware of the tubes and the equipment in a way that would have surprised anyone who had only ever seen him work. Margaret reached out and touched his ear. "Hello, you," she said softly. Rex stood perfectly still and let her. Caden pulled a chair close and sat down. "Surgery went well. Dr. Finch got everything out. You're going to be sore for a while, but you're going to be fine." "I know," Margaret said. "She told me." She kept her hand on Rex's ear. "Did you find him?" "Voss is in federal custody. The man who built the courier system, a man named Elliot Crane, is being arrested at the airport this morning. Halston has the drive with every name, every transaction, every communication. It goes all the way up." Margaret absorbed that. "How many others were there? Like me?" "We're still counting," Caden said honestly, "but we have enough to stop it." She nodded slowly,
Then she looked at him with a directness that he had come to understand was simply how she was, stripped of pretense by everything she had been through. "Tell me about Daniel," she said. He had rehearsed this. He had thought about 3 different ways to say it carefully, and none of them felt right now that he was actually sitting in front of her. So he said it plainly. "We found a classified file from Meridian that lists Daniel as a research subject. The outcome field in his record is blank. That could mean several things, but it does not confirm that he died." He held her gaze. "It means there's a thread. It means Halston's team is going to pull it. It means what Crane told you was a manufactured story built on a real unknown, and that unknown still exists, and now the people with the authority to investigate it properly are aware of it." Margaret was very still. "You're not telling me he's alive," she said. "No," Caden said. "I'm telling you I don't know. And for the first time in 4 years, the people who might know are going to be asked that question under oath." Something moved through her face that was not quite hope and not quite grief. It was the expression of someone who had learned to live in the space between those two things, and was being told that the space had changed shape. "That's enough," she said quietly. "For now, that's enough." Rex exhaled against her hand. At 7:38 in the morning, Halston's call came through. "We have Crane," she said. "Gate agent flagged him when he tried to use a secondary ID at boarding. Charlotte PD had him in cuffs by 7:32, a beat. He had a second drive on him, encrypted. Our tech team says it'll take 48 hours to crack, but preliminary data shows another 16 names. New care homes, new cities, new couriers already in the pipeline." "How many active?" Caden asked. "At least 4. We're contacting the facilities now." Her voice shifted slightly. Something in it that wasn't quite emotion, but was the closest Halston got to it. 3 of them are women. 2 are over 70. 1 is 68, a former Army nurse. All 3 received visits in the past 3 weeks. All 3 were told their missing family members were alive. Caden closed his eyes for 1 second. "We got to them in time?" he asked. 2 confirmed yes. The third one, a woman in Knoxville, was scheduled to travel today. We reached her 40 minutes ago. Her daughter answered the phone. Halston paused. She hadn't left yet. The weight of that was enormous, and Caden let himself feel it for exactly the length of 1 breath.
"Good work," he said.
"It was your dog," Halston said simply. "If Rex doesn't alert in that station, Margaret Doan dies in Charlotte, and we never find the chip, and Crane is on a plane to Zurich this morning, and all of it continues. All of it." A pause. "Tell him I said so." Caden looked at Rex, who was still standing beside Margaret's bed, with his chin resting gently on the blanket near her hand. "He knows," Caden said. "He stayed at the hospital until mid-morning. Dr. Finch came by to check Margaret's vitals and gave Caden a look that said she had heard enough from the nurses to understand what had actually happened in that transit hub the previous morning. And she didn't say anything directly, but she stopped at the door on her way out and said, 'Good dog,' to Rex, in a tone that carried more weight than most speeches. Rex's tail moved twice. Joey came by at 10 with coffee and the kind of exhausted relief on his face that comes from doing something genuinely hard for the first time, and discovering you didn't break under it. He sat in the hallway outside Margaret's room with Caden, and neither of them said much for a while. "I almost told you the first scan was fine and let her go," Joey said eventually. "When it came back clean. I almost said, 'It's clear, sir,' and moved on." "But you didn't," Caden said, "because you told me to run it again." Joey turned his coffee cup in his hands. "I keep thinking about that. One command. Run it again. That's the whole thing. That's the difference between her making that train and whatever happens in Charlotte." Caden looked at Rex, who was lying near the door with his head up, still alert, still watching the corridor. "You know what Rex did when I told him to heel in that station?" Caden said. Joey shook his head. "Nothing. He ignored me completely. First time in 4 years."
Caden paused. "And that's the difference. Not the second scan, not the warrant, not the arrest. The moment Rex decided that what he knew mattered more than the command to stand down." He looked at Joey. "That's where it started." Joey was quiet for a moment. "Does he always know?" "He's never been wrong," Caden said. "Not once." At noon, Margaret was moved to a regular room. Caden stopped in before he left. She was sitting up slightly, more color in her face, and she had asked a nurse to bring her reading glasses from her bag, which Dr. Finch had taken as an excellent sign. "You're leaving," Margaret said. "I have to file 17 different reports before 5 o'clock, Caden said. "Federal, state, hospital incident, canine conduct review, and one specifically dedicated to explaining why I led a German shepherd into a recovery ward." Margaret almost smiled. "What will you say?" "That he had clearance," Caden said. She looked at Rex, who was sitting at the door with his tail moving slowly, watching her with the patient, amber-eyed attention that had not wavered since he first pressed his shoulder against her knee in that screaming room. "He was trying to save me," she said. "From the moment he saw me. He didn't know my name or my story or what was inside me. He just knew something was wrong, and he would not stop saying so." She looked at Caden. "There aren't many people like that, either." Caden didn't answer that directly. He stood up, adjusted his cap, and looked at her with the straightforward steadiness of a man who had learned that some things don't need to be decorated. "We're going to find out what happened to Daniel," he said. "That's not a comfort. That's a commitment." Margaret held his gaze. "I know the difference," she said. He believed her. He and Rex walked out of the hospital into the sharp cold of the late morning, and Rex moved at his heel with the easy precision of an animal that had done the work it came to do and was ready for whatever came next. No performance, no ceremony, just presence, steady and constant, the way it had always been. Caden stopped at the vehicle and stood for a moment with his hand on Rex's neck, looking at nothing in particular, feeling the cold air and the weight of the last 18 hours settling into something he could carry. He thought about Sato. He thought about the tent and the sealed report and the non-disclosure he had signed because he told himself it was the mission. He thought about how long he had been carrying that and how it had sat inside him like something that wouldn't dissolve. He thought about Voss saying, "I have been telling myself that for 8 years, and I stopped believing it about 6 months ago." He thought about the difference between the two of them and what that difference cost and what it saved. Rex leaned against his leg. Caden looked down at him, the tan and black coat, the amber eyes, the patience that asked for nothing and gave everything. "You started this," Caden said quietly. "In that station. You saw something none of us were willing to see, and you would not let it go." He crouched down until he was level with the dog and held his gaze. "Because of you, she's alive. Because of you, 3 other women are home today who might not have been. Because of you, 47 names are in federal hands, and Crane doesn't make it to Zurich, and Voss doesn't burn that warehouse. And a blank line in the classified file becomes a question someone is finally required to answer." Rex blinked slowly. "I spent 12 years being trained to run toward fire," Caden said. "You spent 5 being trained to find what's hidden." He put both hands on the sides of Rex's face, the way he only did when there was no one watching and the moment demanded honesty. "But today you didn't do either of those things because you were trained. You did it because it was right. And you didn't stop until someone listened." Rex pressed his forehead against Caden's. They stayed like that for a moment, the two of them, in the cold and the quiet. 2 survivors, still doing the work. still showing up, still refusing to stand down when something mattered. Then Caden stood, opened the vehicle door, and Rex jumped in. Some truths don't arrive with a revelation. They arrive with a bark in a train station, ignored by everyone except the one man who had learned the hard way that his dog had never once been wrong, and the courage to say, "Run it again," when every protocol said it was clean, and every instinct said it wasn't. Margaret Doan went home 3 weeks later. She carried no bag. Elliot Crane was indicted on 43 federal counts. The trial date was set for spring. The blank line in Daniel Doan's file became the subject of a formal federal inquiry. It was the first time in 4 years that anyone with authority had been required to ask the question out loud. And in the Asheville Regional Transit Hub, on a Tuesday morning that looked like every other one, a Navy SEAL in green and brown camouflage walked the main floor with a tan and black German Shepherd at his heel. And the two of them read the room the way they always did. And the room was quiet. And the work continued. Loyalty does not ask for recognition. It does not calculate the cost before it acts. It does not stand down when the command conflicts with what it knows. It simply refuses to stop until someone finally listens. If this story moved you, leave an amen in the comments below. And tell me what city you're watching from today. I want to see how far this story travels, because stories like this one deserve to go everywhere.